On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
All right, everybody, I'm here with Taylor Rhoades of the Houston Astros organization. Taylor, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate your time. Tell the listeners about yourself, if you would, please.
Taylor Rhoades, Major League Strength Conditioning Coach with the Houston Astros. Been in this role now for 3 years. Coming up through I'll start childhood, I guess. Grew up in the Chicagoland area. All through, my schooling and high school days. Ended up going to college at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. There I played baseball on the varsity program there. That's where I kind of fell in love with strength conditioning and got my feet wet in this industry. From there, I kind of got lucky with an interview with the Houston Astros and kind of left there and went straight to Florida. And from there, it's kind of been a ride through the Astros organization. Pretty much touched almost every single level on my way to the major leagues.
Just undergrad at BGSU or?
I did both there.
Okay.
So I did both at Bowling Green.
Okay, I was gonna say if you went straight undergrad right to the pro ranks, that's pretty baller, to be honest.
So,
no, that's good, man. And like you said, you've been almost every level along the way, right? You've been with the org 9-10 years now, I think you said the other day.
Yeah, this is gonna be my 10th year with the Astros. Yep.
10th year, damn, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It goes by fast, man. Somebody asked me today, and I was like, I've been here kind of for a little bit now.
Yeah, you look back and you think of your early years and it's like, dang, that was 10 years ago. But yeah, it goes by in a flash, and it seems like every season kind of speeds up on you. But yeah, looking back on those early years, I feel like I didn't really know anything, but
yeah, some days I still feel like that.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that for sure, no doubt.
So what is your best professional baseball story that you have thus far? You have to have a ton of them, being in 10 years and having a World Series under your belt now. So what's the best one?
I mean, I think it's hard to not say the recent 2022 World Series run. I think that just, helping me, between me and Hazael Weston, who, is in the big leagues with me, us, doing everything from a day-to-day basis and working with our coaching staff and collaborating and doing everything that we've done, from an interesting start to the year with the lockout and not being able to talk to players all off season, and then, kind of fast forwarding spring training with, a shortened amount of time, and then getting into the season, and then ended up, having a great title run and winning the World Series. I think that's probably the best story I have, specific story. Obviously there's countless others in the minor leagues of, all the bus stories and things like that you go through the minors. But I think from, the professional ranks, that's definitely the big one.
Yeah, and I'm sure looking back over the last decade of your life and just going through the minor leagues and all the trials and tribulations, and then like you win the World Series this year, like I'm sure it's really rewarding for you, and you have a lot of gratitude just towards the process that you had to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. People ask me all the time, and I think one of the biggest things you can do is go through the minor league process and see everything that goes into the day-to-day grind at a minor league level. I think it makes you really appreciate and respect, what goes on at the major league level. Obviously there's a lot more resources and a lot more things that make life easier. But if I hadn't gone through, basically being a clubby at the minor league level and, dealing with food and dealing with travel and dealing with all these other things, I don't think I'd appreciate this role as much as I do. I think for me, it should almost be a prerequisite to get to the big leagues. Just from a knowledge and understanding, we make our players go through it. So I think it only helps staff if they have gone through it.
Yeah, I would agree, man. I think the time in the minor leagues was incredibly invaluable, and just, I've said it on here a million times. Like, I wish everybody could just experience the minor leagues just from, I think it's better now than when we were coming through the system, but just like you said, being a clubby and, making food runs and like finding road gyms and like getting guys organized and just all the other stuff that goes into, when you don't have the resources and you can still be successful and find ways to get guys to do things. Like, when you have those resources, you still have those tricks in your back pocket. And I think it just makes it that much easier for you. Absolutely.
100%.
So what do you believe in within strength and conditioning that others think you are crazy for believing?
Oof. I'd have to say, well, I'll look back to my early years. That, I think coming out of college and, a baseball program and stuff like that, where maybe I wasn't as educated as I should have been, or maybe it's just, learning over time. But I think the whole, you got to be as strong as possible, you got to be as powerful as possible, you got to do all these different things isn't like necessarily true in such a skill and specialized sport like baseball. I think, that for me, the foundational things are extremely important. If you do the basics very, very well, you're going to have success. And that doesn't mean you have to be the strongest guy in the weight room. You don't have to be the most powerful guy in the weight room. I think you need to have all the foundation covered before you start, doing crazy things. I think you and I can both sit here and say that there's a million different people out there trying to pitch you different things, from a S&C standpoint and from a baseball standpoint. Everyone's got the newest, shiniest, sexiest thing. But at the end of the day, I think if you do the basics very, very well, you're going to have success. And so I would say, to answer your question, you don't necessarily have to push, squatting 500 pounds or deadlifting 1,000 pounds or anything like that. I think, there needs to be a minimum standard for sure, that, your athletes should hit. But I think once you have that minimum standard, you can, move off of that route and get a little bit more specialized and pursue some other things.
Yeah, it's funny. People send me stuff all the time. I don't know if it's just, being in the big leagues or whatever. Like, oh, what do you got on this training? What do you got on that training?
Yeah.
What do you got on this for baseball players? What do you got on that? And I'm like,
yeah,
man, there's a lot of different options out there. But I think, like you said, just, being really good at the basic stuff. And the reality is, like, at least for me, sometimes training major league players is doing the boring stuff really well. And it's, sometimes that flashy stuff has a place, but if you saw us training on a regular day, it would just be guys coming in, being consistent with their approach, taking care of business and moving on, and, sprinkle in some of the fancier stuff here and there with the guys that, are justifiably ready for it. But, in baseball, it's all shapes, all sizes, all ages. In the major leagues, we had, one of our pitchers this year was 40 plus years old, and we had a kid that was, 23, 24. Like, it's just a big range of people. And then, like you said, it's so skill oriented that, they're all major league players. So they're all very successful at the game, and then they just get there different ways.
Absolutely. No doubt. I guess I'll touch on another topic that, people like to argue back and forth about. And that's, the aerobic training and aerobic capacity, aerobic base. I guess the way my personal opinion is, I think, there needs to be an aerobic base. I think there needs to be a minimum standard. Once that minimum standard's reached, I think, they're probably pretty good. And I think through my time with the Astros and in professional baseball, I think it's pretty dang hard to impact that in season without, affecting other areas of performance. So, guys going out and running poles and poles and poles, I don't think that's, the right answer. I think there needs to be, I think you need to chase your principles. And if, one of those is, if that's your principle, then chase it. But for me, that's not necessarily something that needs to be chased, especially with position players. I think position players need to train speed more than the aerobic base. Yes, they need aerobic base for, recovery between bouts and between games and things like that, 100%. But I think if the minimum, requirement that we've seen and we've, objectified is met, then, I think they're in a good spot.
Yeah, I think this is something every strength coach has really pondered on back and forth in their career. And the longer you're around, like, you see the pendulum swing back and forth. And, for me, I agree. There's a point where, you have to at least have some sort of standard of it. Otherwise, like, playing 9 innings every single day, especially like you're talking about position players, like, is just going to crush them. And guys are going to get, they're going to get fatigued from the workload, and they're going to regardless. So having the ability to recover, I think, is really beneficial. But there is a lot of running in the game that people don't realize. And so, in the off season, you just have to run more sometimes. And I think sometimes guys come into camp and, their legs are underprepared just for being on their feet as long as they are during spring training and all the early work and the running in the games. And it's, people talk about the high intensity sprinting, and it is really valuable, of course, to sprint, frequently, get those exposures. But at the same time, a lot of those guys just get worn out from, that low intensity, just running back and forth from the dugout to the outfield and, covering balls in the gap or backing plays up. Like, there is a lot of opportunity for them running. So again, I agree. In season, it's really hard to impact that without affecting other things. And there are times where, we've had position players like, hey, I got to go for a little bit of a jog. Like, I just need a mindset. Like, I need to reset my mind and, just get a little bit of a sweat going. Like, okay, great. Like, prefer you do this maybe on an off day, and then we, supplement that with some other recovery stuff, get you some good food and everything. But, it's hard because sometimes, like, it's not great for them, but they're going to do it anyways. Right. And it's like trying to educate them on, like, yes, I know this is going to help you, but there are other ways that we can make you feel really good mentally and physically from a recovery standpoint without you going and running, endless poles and then trying to play in the game tonight. So it's an interesting balance. And I think people on the outside can just say whatever they want because there's no repercussions, right? Like, they're not working with the team that day where, guys like ourselves, we're in the trenches and we're having those difficult conversations with guys. And, I think especially probably the Latin population, a lot of them have grown up with distance running, right? Like, it's just a lot of those guys like to go out and run. And yeah, I think if you pick your spots, it's okay. But I would agree, it's very hard to find time to do that, especially in a major league season with all the travel and the intensity of the games and all of that stuff. So probably better off for the off season and coming into camp in really, really good shape. I don't think it's ever a bad thing to be in really good, just general fitness shape. But once you're there, like, there are other rabbits that I think you need to chase. I would agree 100% with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for, the listeners to know that, there is a difference between off season and in season training. They're not all the same. And, you really have to prioritize some things in season by playing every single day. So that just like you said, we push things in the off season that we don't necessarily push in season. And this probably is, one of those areas where we're going to push a little bit more in the off season so we can pull back a little bit in season. And I think that's, important to note as an S&C coach.
Yeah, I think being ahead of the curve with, the legs and the fatigue and the running volume, before spring training helps just get guys transitioned in. But, there's a lot of injuries early in the season. And a lot of it is just that guys are not used to the workload. And, even just being around the stadium, like, you think about a day in the off season, like, how long is your training really between lifting, running, throwing, and hitting? It's probably not that long. And then, you do all of that during spring training, plus just hang out in the clubhouse, plus the meetings, plus the meals, plus the actual, like, game time. Like, just the amount of time that you're putting, like, mental focus on something just goes, like, through the roof once you hit spring training. And then it's every single day. There's no days off once you start. So
Yep, absolutely.
totally agree with you, man. What do you believe makes a strength and conditioning coach successful?
It's a good one.
Other than winning the World Series, of course.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of things. Let's see. I would say from, like, a value standpoint, I think somebody that's professional, intrinsically motivated, somebody that, obviously there needs to be a level of intelligence and you have to know what you're doing. But then a lot of it is, like, some personal humility. I think those are very good qualities and traits of, a good successful S&C coach. To measure success, I mean, that's really hard to do, as you're well aware of. But in this profession, I think, if you can create buy-in with your athletes, if you can create, the willingness for those athletes to come in and do what they need to do, even if they don't want to do it, I think that, shows success within your program. And then obviously I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about it at the major league level. You have to enhance performance, and you have to, enhance, everything that we do on field to win games. And at the major league level, it's all about winning games and developing players to win games. So I think all those things are necessary for a successful strength coach. Like I said, it's really hard to determine what a successful strength coach is.
Yeah, when I first started including this question in, I always just thought of the traits of a good of a strength coach, right? A successful strength coach. Like you talk about professionalism, intelligence, and personal humility, that kind of stuff. And the more I ask people, it's funny to see them like try to decide if we should talk about like the personal side of like, hey, I'm a good person, so I'm successful, or like the actual like X's and O's success. So I appreciate you like splitting that down the middle there. But yeah, I mean, again, at the major league level, it's winning, right? It's all about winning. And it's not to say that you can't develop players and get them better in the major leagues, because you 100% can. And part of that is how you win, right? Like certain players come up, they're young kids. You teach them how to behave, like how to, be a pro in the big leagues, go about their business. And then some of those guys, the older guys, they're just obsessed with just getting a little bit better. And that little edge makes a difference in the major leagues. It really does. And like, you look at teams that get into the postseason, especially those wild card teams, it's always like 1 or 2 games difference. And like those little edges really do make a difference. And it's something, it's hard for us to measure. Like you said, I 100% agree. But, if you win, like there's gotta be at least some sort of success there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said before, I think, a lot of what your athletes do and they're a reflection on you being successful. If your athletes come in and they buy in and they, do everything that you want them to do without you having to tell them they need to do this, I think that's, another metric of being successful. So.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that like just being a good person goes a long way, and like taking care of guys. And we bend over backwards for guys sometimes, but at the end of the day, like I always feel like it's worth it. I go home after a game, and usually I'm exhausted just from taking care of everybody all day, and like I'm like, all right, I'm ready to do it again tomorrow, right? And like
Yep.
you're exhausted, it's 3 a.m, you got off a flight, like, all right, we got to do it again tomorrow, and that's okay. Like it's a good life. And I think it's been mentioned on here before, like you have to be a little crazy to stick around a long time to like really see this play out. But if you're the right kind of crazy and you are like willing to stick it out, like in the end, at least for me, I think it's really worth it to try to pursue the highest level.
Absolutely. 100%.
Do you have advice for others in the field, either young coaches looking to get in or just older coaches that are just trying to stay on top of things?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, especially young coaches getting in, I think you see success from from my lens through, other strength coaches and things within the industry. I think people that work hard obviously have great success. In this industry, you have to work hard. You're not going to get a lot of the recognition. So just know that. You have to be humble, like I said before. You're literally doing your job so other people can succeed. And a lot of times you get zero recognition for it, and you have to be okay with that. And if you're not, then it's going to be a pretty difficult road for you in this industry. And then the last one I'd say is just, you have to be passionate about S&C. As you and I know, especially at the lower levels, it's, a grind, and you're not going to get paid well. And, the hours are crazy, and the work and the schedule are crazy. And you really have to know what you're getting into to get into this industry. So, not that, you can't make good money or anything like that. I think you just have to put your time in, and, those things will come. But getting into the industry as a young coach, know that, those things aren't guaranteed right away, and you're going to have to, put your time in and do some things you don't want to do to get where you want to be.
Yeah, I love all of that, man. I wrote this extra and I circled it. Do your job so others can succeed. I think that's brilliant, and that's really what we do. And sometimes it's thankless, right? And but the thing is, like, when you do something and a guy sometimes all it takes is like, hey man, thank you, I appreciate it, and you're like, dude, that's all it took for me, right? But even if you don't get that, like, the guys do really appreciate what you do for them. Sometimes they're just in absolute competitive mode, so they're not, you know what I mean, they're so focused on things. But
For sure.
and then you talk about putting your time in, and the money's not guaranteed, and the hours are long, and it just goes back to what we were talking about. You got to be the right type of crazy. And
For sure.
I don't think it's to discourage people, right? Like, if this is something you genuinely want to try, like, you should try it, but just know that, like, it's not all like glamour, especially early on, especially in the minor leagues. I mean, the Appy League's not around anymore, but that's where I started. And like, some people think like, oh, professional baseball, like Boston Red Sox, really cool. And I was with the Pirates, like, oh, Pirates, really cool. And then I'm like, no, man, I was in the backwoods of Tennessee, like grinding it out, bus rides and bad hotels, and like, but it was fine, right? Like, that was what I wanted to do, and it all worked out. So it's not to discourage people, but I think the reality is, like, you have to know those things ahead of time, and if you're still willing to like hear all of that and try it anyways, like, by all means, like, in the end, it is really worth it, like we talked about.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think one other thing is, like, one thing that helps drive me is like knowing that my role as an S&C coach just isn't about like performance. Like, you can make change in somebody else's life, or you can be there for them in different areas rather than just S&C. I think that's another thing that just like drives me to help these guys. A lot of the times, like, we're the outlet where they feel safe and secure, and they can come talk to us about anything, whether it's coaching staff or on-field stuff, or the mental side of the game, or personal life, or whatever it is. I think being there for the guys in those situations too is extremely valuable. So
Yeah, 100%, man. It's really cool, like, to have just normal conversations with those guys, right? And it's like, people look at these guys like, oh, they're major league players, professional athletes, like, that's got to be so cool to like be around them. And like, it is, but also you get to know them as people, and you're like, these are just good dudes. They're just, their dads, their husbands, their sons, their brothers, like, they're just, I've said this before, but one of my favorite days of the year is family day. Like, we go through the work day, we play the game, and then after, everybody's out on the field with their family, taking pictures and playing wiffle ball, and just having a good time with each other, and like, just being able to see them in that lens of like being a dad, being a husband, and just watching them interact with their families, and like, it really gives you some perspective on things. Like, they are very fierce competitors. They're the top of the top in baseball, but also they're just a bunch of regular dudes. And sometimes they just need somebody to talk to them like they're a regular dude, and not like, an elite athlete with all the pressure that they have to deal with. And a lot of the times that comes to us. And I think that's an underappreciated part of the job. And also, along with that, like, you have to be able to have conversations with people and be like a normal person too, right?
Yeah, for sure. No doubt. And I mean, I get asked all the time, like, what's it like working with, whoever, this person or this person? And, I always go back to pretty much the same quote. And it's just like, hey, this guy's a normal dude with a really cool job, and he's really good at his job. Like, that's all it really is. Yes, they're in the limelight and all those things, but at the end of the day, they're still human. They're still going through the same thing as you and I and anyone else in this world. It just happens to be that their job's in the limelight. So yeah, I always go back to that, and know, like, for young coaches getting in, like, hopefully you're doing it for the right reasons, and you want to get in because you can help people and affect change.
Yeah, 100%, man. Couldn't agree more. So where are you going for continuing ed? Are there any books you'd recommend, seminars you've attended, podcasts you're listening to? Just where are you going to stay on top of things?
Yeah, I mean, book wise, I wouldn't say there's like specific S&C books that I always follow or try and dive into. I'm more of a leadership and, habits type book guy. One, recent book that I read was Atomic Habits by James Clear. Very, very good book on just creating small habits that, will change bigger things. So I think that was a really good book to dive into, and it could be, personal life, it could be professional, it could be whatever you use it as, but it's just creating habits within your everyday life to, affect some change. And then, I'm a strength coach, so I like the motivational books by, David Goggins or Jocko Willink. So David Goggins is like Can't Hurt Me or Never Finished. And then Jocko, Extreme Ownership. Those type of books. One sports book that, I dove into more of like a team sport aspect was Legacy, on, the New Zealand All Blacks. I thought that was a great book, just because I could relate to it really well. And it opened my eyes to a lot of things that they do in other cultures. And it talks about building a culture within the clubhouse, and, how seniors on the team there lead pretty much everything. Like they're the last ones to eat, they're the last ones to leave, like all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was a really good book from a team culture standpoint. And then I guess going to like S&C related, or more S&C related, CEO Strength Coach, for those young, S&C professionals getting into the industry. CEO Strength Coach by Ron McKeefery. It's a good one. It gives you a lot of insight on the industry, a lot of, resume building and things like that that'll, help you get started, get the jump start into the career. And then I've also liked, what is it? Winning, and I think Relentless is the other one by Tim Grover, who was Michael Jordan's personal strength coach. And I think he also worked with Kobe Bryant. So all really, like, it's a wide array of books, but I think they all serve their purpose, and, can make you a better strength coach and human by reading them.
Yeah, I like that. I like diversified approach to reading. Like,
Yeah.
Especially as you get older, right? Like maybe when you're young in the field, you want to read a lot of those X's and O's books just to, get some knowledge in the field, and, even like write your own practical programs or just experiment on people. But, as you've been around a while, and you kind of have a good grasp on all the X's and O's, and, especially for us, we've been in pro ball a while. So like we understand how the strength and conditioning aspect of the game works. Like I think diversifying your reading, and just going different places to get information, I think is really valuable. And like you said, books like Legacy, like just seeing how other cultures do it, and, seeing how you can apply that within the context of your own clubhouse, I think is really valuable.
Absolutely. And to piggyback off that, to answer a little bit more of your question, I think, seminars, anything the NSCA puts on is usually pretty good. Obviously they're, one of the better governing bodies for what we do. And then anything PBSCCS, obviously you and I are involved in a lot of that stuff. But anything baseball related, I think that's the go-to place. And then trying to think of like podcasts and stuff like that. Obviously this one, which we're on. But then I also like to, dive outside of S&C. One that's kind of related to S&C would be Huberman Labs. He does a lot of like scientific based stuff, and talks about, different approaches to supplementation or sleep or whatever. And that correlates back to what we do a lot. So I like that. And then Joe Rogan obviously does a wide array of things, but I also like jumping on his podcast every now and then.
Yeah, I've said this before. I have a soft spot for Rogan's podcast just because my dad and I listened to it on a cross-country trip out to Arizona, and he just has so many different guests, so you don't have to listen to every one, but, Kid Cudi comes on, and I'm like, I like his music. Let me check out what he's got to say, or, he's just got so many guests, and they come out so frequently. I'm like, I feel like you have to listen to it. It doesn't have to be every time, but there is something for everybody on that one for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It keeps you on your toes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then eventually he talks about aliens, and then it's like, it doesn't matter who the guest is because he's always talking about aliens, which is incredible. So, no, Taylor, I'd like to do a lightning round, and then I'll get you out of here, man. You cool with that?
Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
Cool. First one, who is your biggest influence in the field of strength and conditioning?
Oof, that's tough. I wouldn't say I have one. I would say I have like two or three. Um, First would be Kenny Goodrich. He was my strength coach in college. Kind of got me really interested in S&C. Kind of got me into the weight room at Bowling Green and helped me, learn a lot of the basic stuff. So he was kind of the mentor early on, and to this day still, reaches out, and we stay in touch pretty routinely. And then once I got over to the Astros, Brennan Verner, he was with me for 8 years, hired me, brought me up through the ranks, taught me pretty much everything I know within S&C and professional baseball. He's currently the head MLB strength coach with the Miami Marlins now. And then one other was Dan Howells, who came over from England. He really opened my eyes to a lot of the sports science and stuff that goes on in other countries that the U.S. is kind of behind on, but we're catching up. So he opened my eyes into a lot of the sports science and understanding metrics and how we can utilize specific objective measures within baseball and correlate it back to performance and all that kind of stuff. So
one piece of equipment to train with, what would it be?
It's tough. I'd probably say barbell, just because you can do so many things with it. I mean, you could push, pull, rotate. You can do anything with a barbell essentially, as long as you're using it properly. So I'd have to go barbell, just because I feel like I could rig anything up to do what I wanted to do with it.
Oh, and I'm sure you have in minor leagues.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
What is your biggest accomplishment professionally and or personally?
Professionally, it's tough to say. I mean, I'd go back and just say winning the World Series this past year, and dealing with everything that we dealt with the lockout, and still, coming out on top at the end of the year. I thought that was a great win for not only me, but, our organization as a whole. And then, personally, I wouldn't say there's necessarily one specific time, but I think anytime I can have a big impact on a player, and that player buying into, what I'm talking about, or even if it's, not even S&C related, if I can have an impact on a player and they come back to me later on about, other things, I think that's a win, on a personal level where, I'm just trying to, help somebody, whether it's S&C or life, I think those are big wins.
Last one, any career other than strength and conditioning, what would you choose?
I'd probably have to say I would be in real estate. Have my real estate license. I grew up in a real estate family, so I would probably have to say real estate to some extent. I always wanted to be a pilot growing up when I was a kid, so that's another thing that I've always loved, is just traveling and seeing new places. So I could see myself doing that, but I think that the safe bet would probably be real estate.
Taylor, it's been fun to talk with you, man. Between this one and the group one we did with Wes, it's good to get to know both of you guys. And obviously, I can tell why you guys had success. You guys work really well, and just seeing you grind up through the minor leagues into the big leagues, and then finally get to the peak this year, man. It's been fun to see from afar, and it's been good for me to get to know you. If the listeners want to get in touch, where can they go? Is social media the best place, or should we go somewhere else?
Yeah, social media is good. I have a Twitter and Instagram. Both I think are at T_Rhoades1. So get at me on there, and I can help with whatever you need.
Cool. I appreciate your time, man. And like I said, it's been good to catch up and talk some shop, and safe travels down to spring training, and we'll see you when we play you guys this year. Sounds good, brother. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude this episode with Taylor. I hope you enjoyed this one. It's really cool to hear his story. He's been with one organization for a decade. He's worked his way up from the minor leagues all the way to the big leagues. And then,
obviously he hit the pinnacle of professional baseball, winning the World Series with the Astros in 2022. And, just hearing about his grind and the work ethic and everything. And, having him and Wes on in a group episode previously and just hearing how well they work together. It's a very inspirational story from, both of them and how their paths crossed and how they ultimately ended up winning the World Series together. So I hope you took as much from him as I did. And the three big things that I took from him in this episode are: looking back on what you've done in the past will help you to appreciate where you are in the present. Personal humility can go a long way in helping you to succeed. And sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do to get to where you want to be. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.